The alarm went off for the third time. Sarah Martinez sat up in bed with her heart racing and a wave of guilt washing over her chest. "Oh no!" she exclaimed when she saw the clock. "It's already 7:50. She jumped out of bed, tripping over Emma's toys, her 5-year-old daughter, and ran to the kitchen while pulling on her sweater. The coffee maker dripped slowly, as if the universe was mocking her rush. She didn't have time for coffee. Emma was still asleep, curled up with her teddy bear. Sarah kissed her forehead and left their small apartment in Queens, with her purse hanging from her shoulder and her hair still damp. Public transit was already chaos. At 8:10, she arrived in Midtown Manhattan. She got off the subway and started running down Fifth Avenue. Her heels echoed against the concrete as she dodged street vendors, office workers and tourists. Traffic roared furiously around her, and all she could think about was the look on Mr. Harrison's face, her boss, when he saw she was late, again. Then she saw him. A man lay on the sidewalk, right at the intersection with West 42nd Street. His face was covered in blood, his shirt torn, and papers scattered everywhere. 2 leather briefcases lay open, their contents exposed to the wind. People walked past him without stopping, as if he were a ghost. Sarah stopped dead in her tracks. Her legs trembled. Common sense screamed at her to keep running, that she'd be late, that she'd lose her job. But another voice, deeper and stronger, told her she couldn't leave him there. She knelt beside the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, carefully placing her hand on his chest. He mumbled something inaudible. He had an open wound on his forehead, and his pulse was beating weakly. Sarah pulled out her cell phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "Yes, there's an injured man on Fifth Avenue, in front of the building at 251 Fifth. He's bleeding badly, please come quick." While waiting for the ambulance, she picked up some of the papers the wind hadn't carried away. They were all filled with figures, charts, and signatures. There was a folder with the name Hartman International. She didn't understand much, but enough to know these were important documents. A paramedic gently moved her aside when they arrived. Sarah stood up, covered in someone else's blood, her heart in her throat. "Are you family?" they asked her. "No, I just found him. I couldn't leave him there. Come with us. You can help if he wakes up on the way." Without thinking, Sarah got into the ambulance. She held onto one of the ceiling straps as the vehicle moved through the streets with sirens blaring, the city vibrating around them. She looked at the stranger, wondering who he was, what had happened to him. An hour later, she was at Mount Sinai Hospital. Doctors rushed in with him and left her waiting on a bench, her hands stained red and her eyes fixed on the floor. "Miss, were you the one who helped him?" a doctor asked when she came out. "I'm letting you know he's in critical but stable condition. Your quick intervention was crucial in saving his life." Sarah nodded, not knowing whether to feel relieved or more worried. She left the hospital around noon. She took the subway back home. Her uniform was stained. Her purse had red spots and exhaustion weighed like lead. That night she barely slept. Emma had a fever, and Sarah didn't have money to take her to the doctor. She put damp cloths on her forehead and gave her the last packet of children's Tylenol she found in the drawer. The next morning, she received the message she'd been dreading. "Sarah, for not showing up without notice or justification, you are hereby terminated. Please come by for your severance this week. Sincerely, HR." Her world came crashing down. The following days were a whirlwind of bad news. The money didn't even cover basic groceries. She fell behind on the gas and rent payments. Emma was still sick and she felt helpless. Mrs. Robertson, her neighbor from 301, was her only relief. She brought her hot soup, clean blankets, and comforting words. "You did the right thing, honey," she said in a soft voice. "God sees everything. That good deed, even though it costs you today, will bless you tomorrow." Sarah smiled sadly. She wasn't expecting blessings, she just wanted to be able to feed her daughter and pay the month's rent. 14 days passed like a grey breath. Sarah woke up every day hoping to receive a call, a response to her job applications, but nothing came. Until that Friday. It was around 5 in the afternoon when she heard the sound of a luxury engine outside her building. She looked out the window and saw a black SUV, the kind you never see on those streets. The back door opened, and out stepped a man dressed in a dark suit, sunglasses, and a serious expression. He walked with confidence, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Sarah felt her stomach tighten into a knot. Someone knocked on the door. "Sarah Martinez?" the man asked, removing his sunglasses. He had a deep gaze and a still fresh scar on his forehead. "Yes," she responded, her voice barely audible. "I'm Michael Hartman. I came to thank you for saving my life." Sarah remained motionless, as if time had stopped right at her door. "Michael Hartman?" she repeated, the name barely escaping her lips. He nodded with a slight smile. "I know you don't recognize me like this, standing and in a suit, but I'm the man you saved on Fifth Avenue. I'm alive because of you, Sarah." She didn't know what to say. She observed him carefully. Tall, imposing presence, perfectly styled dark hair, but with a recent scar still visible on his forehead. His presence filled the building hallway as if he didn't belong to that world. "Can we talk for a moment?" he asked. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, I just need to thank you properly." Sarah, still incredulous, let him in. The living room of her small apartment seemed even more humble with this man sitting there, his gold watch gleaming under the dim light of the bulb. Michael took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "These were some of the documents that fell the day of the accident. You didn't just save me, you saved contracts worth millions. But beyond that, you did what no one else did. You stopped." Sarah pressed her lips together. Her heart was racing with a mixture of fear, nervousness, and gratitude in her chest. "I didn't do anything special," she responded humbly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, Sarah. Almost everyone walked right past. You didn't." He opened the folder and showed her a document. "I'm looking for a new personal assistant. Someone I can trust. You already gave me my life. I want you to work with me." Sarah was breathless. "How? No. I don't have experience for that. I was barely an administrative assistant. I don't need someone with experience managing my schedule. I need someone with values, loyal. And you are." Sarah hesitated. Everything sounded too unreal, too good to be true. What if it was a scam, a trap, a cruel joke? That night, after Michael left, Sarah didn't sleep. She researched on her phone, and what she found left her speechless. Michael Hartman was the president of Hartman International Group, one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country, with investments in technology, energy, infrastructure, and media. He appeared in magazines, news shows, in interviews with presidents. It was real. The next day, she called him. "I accept." The following Monday, Sarah entered Hartman International Tower on Park Avenue for the first time. She wore her only formal outfit, carefully ironed, and her nerves had her on the verge of collapse. The lobby was imposing. White marble, modern sculptures, employees dressed like they'd stepped out of a magazine. She felt completely out of place. A receptionist asked her to go up to the 34th floor. There, Michael was waiting with a sincere smile. "Welcome. Your desk is right outside my office. You'll have direct access to my schedule, my communications, and key projects." Sarah nodded, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. Soon the stares began, the murmurs, the gossip. The first to approach was Victoria Bradford, vice president of the group, tall, elegant, with an intense perfume and a gaze that could freeze your soul. "So you're Sarah," she said in a sweet voice, but with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How quickly people move up in this company, don't you think?" Sarah felt the blow, but only smiled. "Nice to meet you." Victoria leaned in slightly, like a predator smelling its prey. "Be careful, dear. Here, Michael's trust doesn't last forever." Then came Richard Sullivan, the CFO, a middle-aged man, friendly in manner, but with eyes that analyzed everything coldly. "Pleased to meet you," he told her. "This place is a jungle. Friend's advice, don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong." Sarah was beginning to understand that the new world she was stepping into had rules that didn't appear in contracts. A week later, while delivering some reports, she ran into Jennifer Blake at a strategy meeting. She was Michael's ex-wife, blonde, with refined features, and a confidence that chilled her skin. When she saw Sarah, she raised an eyebrow. "And who are you?" "Sarah Martinez, Michael's assistant." Jennifer scanned her from head to toe. "Assistant? Or something more?" The tension was palpable. Sarah didn't respond. She just delivered the documents and left. Despite everything, she focused on her work. She learned quickly, kept her calm, and above all, showed that she hadn't gotten there by luck, but by merit. Little by little, Michael began to trust her with more complex tasks. They traveled together to meetings. They ate in the office, they laughed, they talked about life. He opened up like never before. "It's been years since anyone listened to me without wanting something in return," he confessed one afternoon. Sarah didn't respond with words, but with actions. She organized his personal schedule, took care of his nutrition, reminded him of family calls. She was close without being invasive, firm without being cold, and Michael noticed. One morning, while they were having coffee in the executive lounge, he made her an unexpected proposal. "Sarah, I want you to organize the dinner with the investors from Japan and Germany. It'll be in 2 weeks. You'll have complete authority." "I trust you completely." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "Me alone? You can do it." She nodded, though vertigo invaded her. What neither of them knew was that in the shadows, someone else was already planning her downfall. For 2 weeks, Sarah lived on autopilot. Her life was reduced to spreadsheets, international calls, late-night emails, and visits to vendors. She slept little, ate quickly, but deep down she felt alive. The dinner with the investors was a crucial opportunity, not just for the company, but for herself. Michael had placed in her hands an event that would put Hartman International under the scrutiny of Japan and Germany, and she wasn't planning to let him down. However, the smiles in the office began to hide knives. Victoria Bradford watched her from her office with narrowed eyes. The closeness between Sarah and Michael was eating her up inside. Every decision Sarah made was monitored. Every advance reported to Richard Sullivan. "This is enough," Victoria told Richard one night. "This little girl needs to learn her place." "What do you propose?" he asked, squinting. "A fall. Quick, painful, irreversible." Jennifer Blake, upon learning of the plan, didn't hesitate to join in. If Sarah disappeared from the company, Michael would be vulnerable, and she could reclaim the space that was once hers. The plan was set in motion. They would discreetly change the event protocol. They would manipulate the menu to cause discomfort among the guests. And the dirtiest part, they would invite a sensationalist reporter with a hidden camera, willing to twist everything to publish a scandal. Meanwhile, Sarah remained unsuspecting. She supervised the event venue, a terrace overlooking Central Park, checked every flower, every light, every assigned seat. Everything had to be perfect. The big day arrived. Sarah arrived at the event hall at 4 in the afternoon. She wore an elegant navy blue outfit, discreet but professional. She greeted each vendor, made verification calls, and for the first time in a long time, felt pride in what she was about to accomplish. The first guests began to arrive just before 8. Japanese executives in dark suits, Germans with cold but impeccable manners, local executives, allied businessmen. All were greeted with a smile and a glass of wine. Michael arrived shortly after, impeccable, with a discreet smile that lit up when he saw her. "You look incredible," he told her quietly. "I'm proud of you." Sarah felt a lump in her throat, but only nodded with a smile. During the first few minutes, everything flowed as it should. Soft music, diplomatic conversations, toasts between leaders. Sarah watched every corner with the attention of an orchestra conductor. But at 9:25, the problems began. First, the premium white wine requested was replaced with a cheap version. Then the main course, which should have been filet with red wine reduction, was served raw. The guests began to murmur. Sarah ran to the chef. "What happened with the orders? This isn't what was requested." "What I have here is the menu you people gave me, miss, signed and sealed." It was a copy, obviously manipulated, but there was no time to argue. Sarah tried to improvise, reorganize. She could no longer save the menu, but at least she could salvage the multimedia presentation, or so she thought. When the main screen turned on, instead of the carefully edited institutional video, a poorly assembled clip appeared with choppy images, false figures, and a distorted voice talking about covert layoffs and shady accounts. The guests looked confused. Michael, speechless. "Turn that off right now," Anna shouted at the technician, running toward the equipment. The seconds seemed like hours. The video finally stopped, but the damage was done. The looks had turned hard. The murmurs were no longer discreet. And in a corner, a reporter was taking pictures while pretending to check his phone. Michael approached Sarah with a serious face. "What was that?" I don't know. That wasn't the right file. I checked it this afternoon. Everything was fine." "I don't understand what happened, Sarah," he said, walking away coldly. There were no more words. Michael said goodbye to the investors as best he could, offering formal apologies and promises of a future meeting. Sarah, devastated, picked up her purse and left through the back door, tears blurring her vision. That night, she cried, sitting at the foot of Emma's bed. "Mum, why are you crying?" the sleepy girl asked. "Because I did everything right, sweetheart, and still everything went wrong." Mrs. Robertson arrived with chamomile tea and her years of wisdom. "When you act with a clean heart, the truth always finds its way," she said. "Don't let them make you doubt yourself, honey." Sarah nodded, her soul in pieces. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Michael was reviewing documents, messages, and digital files. Something didn't add up. Too many failures, too coincidental. When reviewing internal reports, he found that the protocol changes were signed by Richard, and a hidden email in a shared folder left him cold. Victoria had contacted the reporter weeks before the event. It didn't take long to discover a bank transfer to an unknown account. There was no doubt. They had sabotaged her, him, the company. He called his security assistant. "I want a private meeting. Tomorrow at 9 sharp. Only 3 people. Victoria Bradford, Richard Sullivan, and Sarah Martinez." His eyes burned with rage. They were going to pay. The conference room on the 34th floor, usually bright and full of corporate voices, was in complete silence that morning. Only 3 people sat at the table: Victoria Bradford, with a haughty expression, Richard Sullivan, visibly nervous, and Sarah Martinez, with downcast eyes and a heavy heart. Michael Hartman entered without a word, accompanied by 2 security assistants who closed the door behind him. "Thank you for coming," he began in a firm voice. "I'm not going to waste your time, nor mine." He placed a tablet on the table and played a series of files, emails between Victoria and the sensationalist journalist, suspicious transfers from Richard's account to a non-existent vendor, manipulated documents with their signatures. "What does this mean?" Victoria snapped with feigned indignation. "It means you sabotaged the most valuable person who has ever worked at this company," Michael responded without hesitation. "It means you put years of alliances and Hartman International's reputation at risk, just out of jealousy and personal ambition." Richard tried to speak, but Michael interrupted him with a single look. "You're both fired. Your accounts will be audited, Richard. We've already contacted the DA. Victoria stood up, shaken. "For her? You're going to destroy everything for that woman?" "Not for her," Michael responded, walking towards Sarah. "For the truth." Sarah said nothing. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of sadness. When the room was empty, she headed for the door. "Thank you for defending me, but I don't think I can stay here anymore, Michael. This broke me inside." He approached slowly. "Sarah, I don't want you to leave. I made a mistake doubting you. I allowed the wrong voices to influence me. And you didn't just save me physically that day. You also gave me back something I had lost: faith." Sarah looked at him surprised. "In what?" "In people. In real love." He was quiet for a few seconds before speaking again. "I want to offer you the position of Chief Operating Officer. It's yours if you accept it, and not out of pity or debt, but because you earned it with your talent, your integrity, and your heart." Sarah felt something in her chest release. Tears began to flow, but this time not from sadness. "I accept," she said, her voice trembling. Months later, the environment had changed completely. Sarah, now as director, led key projects, was respected by everyone, and her schedule was full of goals but also happy moments. Michael and she had allowed themselves to love without rushing, without masks. Emma had accepted him with a naturalness that touched Sarah's heart. They played together, cooked pancakes on Sundays, and had sleepovers in the living room with old movies. One day, Jennifer Blake appeared unexpectedly at the office. Sarah received her without resentment. "I just came to say I finally understand," Jennifer said, more serene. "Michael is no longer the same, and you did what I never knew how to do, care for him without possessing him." Sarah thanked her with a handshake, without extra words. Some chapters don't need revenge, just a period. The wedding was held in the Hamptons, in an intimate ceremony by the ocean. Emma, in a white dress and flower crown, walked as a flower girl tossing petals, while Mrs. Robertson watched her with tears and pride. Sarah wore simple elegance. Michael waited for her at the end of the aisle with a look that spoke of love, respect, and shared destiny. They swore eternal love among trees, children's laughter, and the murmur of the waves. Afterward, they moved to a house in Westchester, where Sundays were sacred for family breakfasts, where Sarah could go out to her garden in a robe, coffee in hand, and watch her daughter grow up happy, without want. 5 years later, Sarah stood on the terrace watching the sun rise behind the hills. Emma played with a puppy in the yard, and from inside came the aroma of toasted bread and coffee. Michael approached from behind, wrapping his arms around her. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah smiled. "About the day I was late for work, and I came across a man lying on Fifth Avenue. Do you regret it?" She looked at him tenderly. "No, that day changed my life. I lost everything, to gain everything." They embraced in silence as the new day began.